December 30th, 1968. Laos, on the border with South Vietnam. Staff Sergeant Robert Louis Howard was on his 15th mission with MACV-SOG when the ambush that the North Vietnamese had laid for his reconnaissance team closed from three sides simultaneously. The team was a MACV-SOG recon patrol, Americans and indigenous Montagnard fighters operating in Laos, in territory that was officially neutral, on missions that officially did not happen, to collect intelligence on the Ho Chi Minh Trail supply system that was sustaining the North Vietnamese war effort in the south. The Ho Chi Minh Trail passed through the mountains and forests of Laos and Cambodia in a network of paths and roads that the North Vietnamese had developed with years of effort, and that the American military needed desperately to understand and interdict. The intelligence that would allow that interdiction could only be collected by small teams that entered the trail area, observed, and exported. The teams that did this work were MACV-SOG, and the specific missions they conducted were among the most dangerous in the American military's entire Vietnam experience. The ambush that closed on Howard's team on December 30th, 1968 killed the team leader immediately and wounded Howard and most of the other team members in the first seconds of contact. The North Vietnamese force that had set the ambush was numerically superior and had achieved the surprise that ambush requires, and the tactical situation in the first minutes of contact was the specific kind of situation that combat training addresses in the most direct terms possible. Howard took command. He moved through the ambush kill zone under fire to reach the team leader, found him dead, and immediately reorganized the surviving team members into a defensive position that gave them the best prospect of surviving until extraction could reach them. He was already wounded. He continued to fight. The action that Howard conducted over the next hours, directing the team's defense, repeatedly exposing himself to fire to recover wounded team members, calling for and directing the extraction aircraft that eventually reached them, earned him a recommendation for the Medal of Honor that the Army reviewed and converted to the Distinguished Service Cross. It was not the first time he had been recommended for the Medal of Honor. Robert Louis Howard was born in Opelika, Alabama, in 1939, the son of a working-class family in the specific corner of the American South where military service was both a tradition and an economic opportunity, one of the limited number of paths available to young men of modest backgrounds who wanted something more than what the local economy offered. He had enlisted in the Army at 18, served in the paratroopers, and had eventually found his way to the Special Forces through the combination of performance and persistence that was the only way into the Green Berets in the 1960s. He had deployed to Vietnam early in the American involvement, had served with distinction in conventional Special Forces roles, and had eventually been selected for MACV-SOG, the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, which was the name designed to obscure the fact that it was conducting offensive military operations in countries that the United States was officially not at war with. MACV-SOG operations were conducted in Laos and Cambodia throughout the Vietnam War, gathering intelligence on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, directing airstrikes against trail infrastructure, rescuing downed pilots, and conducting direct action operations against specific high-value targets. The teams that conducted these missions were small, typically 6 to 8 men, a mix of American Special Forces operators and indigenous Montagnard fighters who were among the most effective light infantry in Vietnam, and they operated in territory where if they were compromised they could expect no reinforcement and limited rescue. The casualty rates in MACV-SOG were among the highest of any unit in the Vietnam War. The men who continued to volunteer for these missions after their initial assignments were men who had made a specific calculation about the value of the work and the acceptability of the risk. Howard made that calculation repeatedly. He served 54 missions with MACV-SOG over the course of his Vietnam service. The first occasion on which he was recommended for the Medal of Honor had been in November 1967, when he was serving as a staff sergeant with Operational Detachment B-57. His team had been ambushed in Laos, and Howard's actions in defending the team and recovering wounded team members under fire had been documented in the citation that recommended him for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation had been downgraded to the Silver Star. The second occasion was the December 1968 engagement, for which he received the Distinguished Service Cross. The third occasion was in November 1970, when Howard, by then a Sergeant First Class, had been on another MACV-SOG mission in Laos when his team was again ambushed by a larger North Vietnamese force. The action that followed was of the same character as the previous two, Howard repeatedly exposing himself to fire to recover casualties, directing the defense, calling and coordinating the extraction, doing the specific things that made the difference between the survival and the destruction of the team under his responsibility. This time, the recommendation for the Medal of Honor was approved. President Nixon presented Howard the Medal of Honor at the White House on March 2, 1971, for his actions in November 1970. The citation described with the specific language of official commendation the actions that had, on this third occasion, been deemed to meet the standard that 2 previous occasions had not. Howard accepted the medal with the specific dignity of a soldier who understood that the medal was representative of what all 3 actions had been, not a distinction between the November 1970 action and the previous 2, but a recognition that had eventually arrived for a performance that had been sustained over years of the most dangerous operations the Vietnam War produced. He continued to serve. The Medal of Honor did not end his operational career in the way that it ended the careers of many recipients who were moved to non-combat roles after receiving it. Howard continued to deploy, continued to serve in Special Forces, continued to be the soldier that 54 MACV-SOG missions and 3 Medal of Honor level actions had made him. He retired from the Army in 1992 as a colonel, having served 36 years, having accumulated a set of decorations that included the Medal of Honor, a Distinguished Service Cross, 7 Silver Stars, 8 Bronze Stars with Valor, 3 Purple Hearts, and dozens of additional decorations for valor and service. The men who served with Howard in MACV-SOG describe him with the specific vocabulary that soldiers use for the men who define the standard in their profession, terms that captured both the extraordinary physical courage that 3 near-fatal engagements had not diminished and the specific professional quality that made him effective in the most difficult operations environment in the Vietnam War. He was the man you wanted with you when things went wrong. Things went wrong regularly in MACV-SOG. Howard was regularly there. The specific injustice of Robert Howard's relative obscurity is not one that simple explanations produce. He was not a celebrity soldier. He did not write a memoir or cultivate a public profile. The missions he conducted were classified at levels that prevented disclosure for years after the events. But there is also the specific character of the Vietnam War's relationship with American public memory, a relationship that the war's contested political legacy complicated in ways that the Second World War's relationship with American memory was not complicated. The soldiers who performed extraordinary actions in Vietnam received less public recognition than their counterparts in the Second World War, not because their actions were less extraordinary, but because the war they were fighting in was less celebrated. Howard's 3 Medal of Honor level actions, 2 of which were downgraded to lesser decorations, span the period when MACV-SOG was conducting some of the most consequential intelligence and direct action operations of the entire Vietnam War, operations that the American public was not told were happening and that the historical record did not fully capture for decades after they concluded. He was the most decorated American soldier of the Vietnam War. He received less public recognition for this than Audie Murphy received for the most decorated American soldier designation of the Second World War, not because Howard's performance was less remarkable, but because the war and the missions and the character of the man himself did not produce the public narrative that Murphy's story produced. He died on December 23, 2009, at the age of 70, in Texas. He had served 54 missions in the most dangerous operational environment in the Vietnam War. He had been recommended for the Medal of Honor 3 times. He had received it once, and 2 Distinguished Service Cross-level decorations for the other 2 occasions. He was the soldier you wanted with you when things went wrong. Things went wrong 54 times. He was there every time.